Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyas Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Yes, very good, devotees. So let us begin. Let us just dive into the actual text of Bhagavad Gita. Last night, of course, we did discuss a little bit about the first verse, but just its position as the first verse, really, and how it's connected with the last verse. A very interesting subject. When I first heard that many years ago, it was like, wow. And then to see how it was true, really good. All right, so but now we're going into verse 1, and we're going to discuss verse 1. We're going to be discussing this first chapter for another 5 evenings. Another 5. So the rest of this week is 4. Then weekends, we don't have the classes. And then on Monday, we'll discuss. So there are, 46 verses, if I remember correctly. And we're going to go through all of them in 5 one-hour sessions. Means plus or minus, give or take, 9 verses a night. I mean, not exactly. It's not going to be mechanical like that, but, something along those lines, just so we don't rush anything. So let's read the first verse again. Dhritarashtra uvacha, dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yoyutsavaha, mamaka pandavas chaiva, kim akurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? As we mentioned last night, it's not really it's not exactly a real question. It's alluding in diplomatic ways to the situation there. Yeah. And Dhritarashtra's concern, what's going to happen to my sons? Actually, before I go further, what I should have told you is that we've mentioned how in an overview, what you do, you divide up the chapters of whatever the text is into natural sections in terms of the flow of discussion, instruction, subject matters, and like this. So in the first chapter, there are 2 main sections, really. They're from verse 1 to verse 26, and then verse 27 to 46. I mean, there's a little overlapping, maybe around 26, 27. We'll see when we get there. So from verse 1 to 26, you've got 3 subsections. Let's just focus on this right now, and we'll focus on this. So from verse 1 to verse 13, it's like introduction and description of the strengths of both armies to Dhritarashtra. That's verse 1 to verse 13. Then from verse 14 to verse 19, wait a minute. No. There's the description of the strengths. Just bear with me. There is a description of the strengths, which takes us up to verse 1 to verse 11. Well, verses 1 and 2 are just very introductory. Then verses 3 to 11, it's Duryodhana introducing the armies and being diplomatic. Verse 12 to verse 20 is basically the blowing of conch shells and the effects of that. Verse 14 to 12 to 20 or 12 to 19. Verses approximately 20 to 26 or 21 to 27. There's some flexibility because there's often like real overlapping. So 20 to 26 or 21 to 27 is the devotees have put together this overview book. They call it Krishna as Bhakta Vatsala, which anyway, when we get there, we'll see that part of it at least is like that. And it's actually very nice, Krishna as Bhakta Vatsala. And that takes us pretty much to the end of the first section, the first major section, there being 2 in the first chapter. And then the rest from say verse 27, verse 28, around about there, till the end of the chapter, it is Arjuna's lamentation. We've all heard about that. And we're going to go into it in some depth. All right, so back to verse 1. Back to verse 1. Let's just have a look at verse 1. There are all sorts of interesting things there. There's just all sorts of interesting things. The first interesting thing, and it's really very important, is how in the first sentence or sentences within just a few words of the beginning of the whole Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says in the second sentence that in the Gita Mahatmya, which we read last night, we're not going to read it every night, it'll take too long. But in the Gita Mahatmya, it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Sri Krishna. Well, that's the first thing. And then try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. And this is what happens with Arjuna. He is helped by Lord Krishna, of course, but the principle is the same, that you don't just do it yourself, Bhagavad Gita. Do it yourself. Do it yourself so many things. As I've said many times, I'm sure some of you have heard, when I started trying to learn Russian, I was walking past a bookshop somewhere, and what should I see in the window? Learn Russian in 30 days. And I thought, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. That's good. So I purchased the book and I got into it, I tell you what. And I can confirm, after 30 days, I did not know the Russian language. I mean, I knew of some things, but forget it. Learning the Russian language in 30 days. And forget about do-it-yourself Bhagavad Gita, do-it-yourself Krishna consciousness. So this is just one of the most essential points, if not the most, but let's say at least one of the most, in the whole Bhagavad Gita. How are we going to learn Bhagavad Gita? What is our approach, the process? Yeah, how are we going to do it? We are going to do it under the guidance, under the, not just guidance, but even direction of a devotee. And it's not just any devotee, not just some devotee, but, well, Arjuna learned from Krishna, but from a bona fide devotee or bona fide spiritual master. And therefore here we are learning Bhagavad Gita from Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Without that, good luck. But it won't be enough. Yeah, so, all right. So that's, we're going through paragraph by paragraph, more or less. And we'll skip a few paragraphs here and there. But like we touched on, Prabhupada reiterates the principle that the example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the way the teachings understood by Arjuna, who heard the Gita directly from the Lord. If someone is fortunate enough to understand Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. Wow, isn't that a big statement? Yeah. Studying Bhagavad Gita properly in parampara puts you in a position, if you do it, as Prabhupada says, very scrutinizingly, then you surpass not just all studies of Vedic wisdom, but all scriptures of the world. Hari Bol. You know, I can think of a few sort of groups of people who we shouldn't tell that to. It's a bit of a drastic statement, but actually it's true. It's actually true. So let's carry on, and we'll skip the second paragraph and go on to the third, the discussion about the significance of Dhritarashtra using the word to refer to the place where the battle's going to take place as Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra. Kshetra, of course, means place, or a field, or just a piece, an area of land, of ground. So Kurukshetra means it was the place of the Kurus. And that's who is there getting ready to fight. Two divisions of the Kuru family. The sons of Dhritarashtra and the sons of Pandu. who were brothers. So Dharmakshetra, and as Prabhupada points out in this third paragraph, that Dhritarashtra is referring to specifically noting Kurukshetra as Dharmakshetra, Dharma meaning religion, piety, proper performance of duty, and ultimately there's an unavoidable religious undertone at the very least, if not just totally religion. So Dhritarashtra, Prabhupada mentions just, it's what, the second sentence in the third paragraph. He was highly doubtful about the possibility of his son's ultimate victory. And in his doubt, as we mentioned last night, he inquired from Sanjay, Kima Kurvata? Kima Kurvata means, what did they do? Well, obviously they're going to fight, but really what he's getting at is who's going to win? What's the outcome going to be? Yeah. An interesting little point, which Prabhupada mentions in a class, is that Dhritarashtra wanted the battle to happen. And one reason he asks, what did they do? Is there's this slight hint of a concern. They may have made a settlement. They may have negotiated a settlement, meaning some division of the kingdom, which is not his idea. Yeah, that's just a hint of an idea. Otherwise, he wants the battle to happen, but he's really worried because he knows that his sons are not pious, they're not religious, whereas the Pandavas are very, extremely. Like Yudhishthira is practically the embodiment of religion and piety and honesty, just such a sattvic person. Whereas his sons, Prabhupada points out, I think it's in a class, that Duryodhana, who's the chief son, he is an empowered incarnation of the personality of Kali Yuga, of Kali, Haribol. It's not Kali Yuga yet when all this is happening, but he's an empowered expansion of Kali, just too evil and devious and selfish and nasty and abusive. And the other sons, in Mahabharata, there's mention that sometime before that the main celestial demons entered the bodies of Dhritarashtra's sons. So this battle it's not just a battle for a kingdom or even for the planet. It's got sort of universal implications, because many of the demigods have taken birth, are present on the side of the Pandavas. So you could say, in a certain sense, it's like one of these big classic universal battles between the demigods and the demons for control of the universe. At least there are elements of that there. Right, so now here, an interesting point which we must mention, and we must mention it because it is going to come up, I believe, I was told, in one of your exams or tests or whatever, if you're doing the Bhakti Shastri, that now, how is it that Sanjaya is able to relate all this, to see all this? Yes. So Prabhupada explains, it's right at the end of the third paragraph. Sanjaya was a student of Vyas, and therefore by the mercy of Vyas, Sanjaya was able to envision the battlefield of Kurukshetra even while he was in the room of Dhritarashtra. And so Dhritarashtra asked him about the situation on the battlefield. Okay. So, yeah, that's how he got that. What Prabhupada elsewhere refers to transcendental television. And it takes us into the last paragraph. The last paragraph. And there's an interesting, sort of in the middle of the paragraph, interesting statement there that as in the paddy field, the rice field, the unnecessary plants are taken out, so it is expected from the very beginning of these topics that in the religious field of Kurukshetra, Dharmakshetra, where the father of religion, Sri Krishna, was present, the unwanted plants like Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana and others would be wiped out, and the thoroughly religious persons headed by Yudhisthira would be established by the Lord. Yeah, and an interesting thing is that Dhritarashtra, he basically, he's fearful it's going to be like that, but there are reasons underlying the fear, because he does understand who are the Pandavas, and he does understand to some degree who is Krishna. And we will read, when we go on after a few days, I forget exactly where it is, but we will read a little part of the lamentation of Dhritarashtra, which comes, it's in the earlier parts of the beginning parts of Mahabharata, because Mahabharata is just huge. It's in the first part, just a little bit into the Mahabharata. And it's Dhritarashtra after the battle explaining why he knew it was going to come out like that. Oh, Krishna. Oh, boy, it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Because of this, I knew it would work out like this. Because of that, I heard there's 1,000 reasons he gives. I don't know if it's exactly 1,000, but it's a lot. It's just pages and pages of reasons why I knew we were going to lose. Okay, so this is the arrangement of the Lord then, that the undesirables are going to be eliminated, and those who are the people of the Lord, the representatives of the Lord, they're going to be established for the benefit of all humanity. An interesting little detail which Prabhupada touches on in the verse itself, Dhritarashtra refers to, he uses the word mamaka, which means my sons. Mamaka Pandava, Mamakas Pandavas Chaiva. My son, my party, my sons, and the sons of Pandu. You know, as we mentioned, they're directly family members. Dhritarashtra and the father of the Pandavas who passed away, Pandu, they're brothers. They're brothers. So their sons are brothers, cousin brothers. They're practically like brothers. It's just one family, but still Dhritarashtra is distinguishing. As Prabhupada says, he separated the sons of Pandu from the family heritage. Okay, so let's go on to verse 2. Let us move along. Okay, I'll read the verse. Sanjaya uvacha, drishtva tu pandavanikam, vyudham duryodhanastada, acharyam upasangam ya, rajavachanam abravit. Sanjaya said, and this is he's not exactly answering the question. It's related, obviously, to the question, but it's not just an answer. So Sanjaya said, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. So, you know, I don't know if you noticed, but just in the previous, was there? There was mention of, no, maybe in the purport, some mention. But here, interesting point. Duryodhana is referred to as King Duryodhana. And Prabhupada mentions that in the purport. Although, you know, strictly speaking, according to the, it says, it's right there. Raja Vachanam Abravit. The king spoke. Duryodhana spoke to his teacher, who is Dronacharya, who is, you know, the leader really of his army. So here now, Prabhupada, in this purport, is not such a big purport. Prabhupada discusses the condition of Dhritarashtra and of his sons. He was blind physically. He was also blind spiritually. And as Prabhupada says, he knew very well that his sons were equally blind in the matter of religion. He knew very well. You know, like I said, when we get to that point and we read just a little bit of his lamentation, you'll see it's too ironic. It's just far too ironic. So he was equally blind, and his sons were equally blind. And he was sure they could never reach an understanding with the Pandavas, who were all pious by birth. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So, you know, it could be that Sanjaya is trying to sort of encourage Dhritarashtra by explaining about, you know, the setup there and how strongly his Duryodhana's army is set up, and all the people who are there, and, you know, on a certain level, it sounds very promising. On another level, it's not very promising at all. So let's see. So what's going on then? Duryodhana who's like the king. He goes to his teacher, Dronacharya, who's kind of like the head of the commander of the army. So now, an interesting point is that through these in this verse and through these coming verses, something which is not mentioned so much, but it is just an interesting point, is that Duryodhana, who is, Raj Uvacha, he's the king. Effectively, he's ruling. So kings are politicians, and they have to deal with different people, different situations, and even very tricky and convoluted situations, and somehow sort them out. So Duryodhana knows how to be diplomatic, to say the right things at the right time to the right people to achieve your goals. So just an interesting little point, it's brought out by one of our acharyas, is that in the Sanskrit here, it says, Raja Vachanam Abravit, which literally means he spoke some words. He just said something. It doesn't mean that, he really gave very powerful instructions or directions for the battle. He just spoke some words diplomatically to influence in the ways that he wanted to influence certain people. First of all, being Dronacharya. So then, well, let's now have a look at verse 3. And some say that Duryodhana is revealing his own fears, like Dhritarashtra had fears. So some say that Duryodhana also had fears, and he's expressing them here in this and the following verses, but in diplomatic ways, so as not to put off or de-enthuse any of his soldiers, particularly his main men. But actually there's anxiety there. So he speaks, the third verse, I won't read the Sanskrit. So he's speaking to Dronacharya. O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada. Here is some blatant diplomacy. What he's trying to do is stimulate Dronacharya that, come on, you got to get yourself together. You got to get yourself together, because look at this. Our main opposition are people who you have trained. So you've got to be on the ball. Yeah. And particularly your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada, yes. So Prabhupada tells the story. We don't really need to go into the details, but the son of Drupada, what's his name? Drishtadyumna, that's right. Drishtadyumna, Drishtadyumna is not really like one of the big warriors. He's not a small timer, but he's not Arjuna or Bhima. He's not someone like that. So why did Duryodhana say, look at how the other army is, so nicely arranged by your disciple? Drishtadyumna was overseeing the army, but he wasn't known as a powerful warrior. Again, it's just to bring it home to Dronacharya that you have to really watch out here, because you have trained these people. Even Drishtadyumna, there was some conflict between, Prabhupada explains actually in the purport, there was a conflict between Drupada, the father of Drishtadyumna, and Dronacharya. And as a result, Drupada, he got just extremely disturbed. So he did a yajna to get a son who would kill Dronacharya, and that was Drishtadyumna. And Dronacharya knew that this boy has come as an answer to the prayer, or as the result of a yajna for producing someone who will kill me. But still, when Drishtadyumna was brought in front of Dronacharya as a young boy, and Dronacharya was asked, can you please train him in all the military secrets and just all the military sciences? Dronacharya immediately agreed, even though he knew, this is the boy who's going to kill me. So yeah, Duryodhana, he's being diplomatic. So let's see. So first of all, Duryodhana is going to describe the warriors on the other side, not on his side. And Prabhupada, in a class on these verses, Prabhupada makes the following comment. Let's say, a pragya, an intelligent man, not only thinks of the bright side of his business or of a fight or of anything. So many things we have to deal with. Simply, we should not calculate the brighter side. There is darker side also. We should always think, if there's some thief, if there's some rogue, they'll cheat us. Then what precaution am I going to take? This is intelligence. If I simply calculate that in this business I'll make so much profit, then in the meantime somebody comes and cheats me and goes away. Therefore, and this is the Sanskrit term, upayan chintayet pragya, apayan cha chintayet. Upayan chintayet pragya, apayan cha chintayet. The darker side also should be thought of. That is intelligence. So, yeah, this is why Duryodhana, first of all, lists out the main warriors in the Pandava side before listing out the main warriors on his side. Because first thing is, you must note the darker side, not the brighter side. First thing, you must do like that. Yes. So Prabhupada's talking about that happening there. So yes, first calculate the strength of the enemy, then see what you will do. All right. So then we go on to verse 4. Verse 4. Here in this army are many heroic bowmen, equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna. Great fighters like Yuyadhan, Virat, and Drupada. Aha. Yes. So, who is the first one he mentions? It's Bhima. It's Bhima. And then Arjuna. But first is Bhima. Because Bhima's also, he's another student of Dronacharya, as is Arjuna. They're both students of Dronacharya. But Bhima is the one who has vowed to kill all the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. Yeah, so first person noted is this, like really heavy warrior, Bhima, who is really, he's got real inspiration for fighting like you've never seen anyone fight. And now again, there's going to be a question on this. Bhima took 3 vows. Bhima took 3 vows, which were like very terrible vows. He vowed to kill all the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. For your test or exam or whatever, you're meant to know this. So he vowed to kill them all. And during the battle, Arjuna and the other Pandavas had opportunities to kill some of those 100 sons, but they didn't, because they wanted to let Bhima fulfill his vow. Yes. Oops. Oh, Krishna. Don't tell me. They wanted Bhima to fulfill his vow. I'm getting too carried away here. Yeah. And his vow was, fasten your seatbelts, everyone, not just to kill them all, but to drink the blood of them all, every single one. Yeah. And when he killed 1 or 2, that's what he'd do. And when he'd do that, he'd scream. He would scream and roar. And his screaming and roaring was so ghastly and shocking that even the warriors on the Pandava side, on his side, they became frightened. And even, they say, Krishna became frightened, hearing this roaring of Bhima. So second vow he took was that he would break Duryodhana's thigh or hip or, like that. Because when Draupadi was being insulted at that gambling match, Duryodhana uncovered his thigh and motioned to Draupadi and said, "Come, sit on my lap. You are fit for my enjoyment." And Bhima didn't like that. For 13 years, he was just burning with rage to destroy Duryodhana. And third vow was, devotees, Haribol, to tear open Dushasana's chest. He was like the second son of Dhritarashtra. Tear open his chest, tear out his heart, and drink his blood. Haribol. because Dushasana had touched Draupadi's hair and opened her hair, so her hair, long hair, because in those days ladies always had long hair. I mean, many do these days too, but not all. In those days, pretty much that was the way they did things. But they always tied it up, unless there was death. They would only untie if there was death, like in the immediate family. So, therefore, Bhima vowed to tear out his heart, drink his blood, and rip off his arm. And Draupadi kept her hair untied until she washed it with Dushasana's blood. And Bhima, when he did this, then he carried to her his blood, and she washed her hair. And then with the blood, and then she washed her hair, and she tied her hair up again after 13 years. Aha. All right. Let us go on. So further description in verse 5, it's just more of the main warriors. Yeah. It's funny, Kashiraj is fighting on the side of the Pandavas. Anyway, okay. He ends up fighting Krishna later. So, and verse 6 is the same thing. It's still the soldiers on the side of the Pandavas. And particularly important there is Yudamanyu. Yudamanyu. His other name is, well, Yud. Yud means battle, war. And he's the leader of Krishna's army. And his other name is Satyaki. Yudamanyu is Satyaki, who great warrior general of Krishna. Aha. Then the son of Subhadra, Abhimanyu, who was killed very unfairly, the sons of Draupadi, and they're all Maharata. Maharata means, well, it literally means great chariot fighters. Generally, it means they can fight with something like 10 chariot warriors simultaneously. Then in so that was the description of the Pandava, the main people in the Pandava army, and particularly to stimulate, you could say, Dronacharya, because so many of them are the students of Dronacharya. Yeah. We've got an internet problem here. Let's just hope it comes back. Can you still hear me there? Just a moment. Something happened. All right, so here we are then. Verse 8. Let us read verse 8. Just the translation. There are personalities on his side. There are personalities like you, means Dronacharya, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashvatthama, Vikarna, and the son of Somadatta called Burishrava, who are always victorious in battle. So here's another interesting little point. It's a subtle point. He's now introducing his main warriors to themselves. To themselves. Yeah. So who is he going to introduce first? Bhishma or Drona? What would you think? Well, Drona, I mean, obviously, but why? Because Drona is a Brahmin. He's a Brahmin. Even though Bhishma is senior, but Drona Drona's a Brahmin. Yeah. So as a Kshatriya, Bhishma would honor the etiquette of offering the Brahmin more respect. And therefore Duryodhana said, Bhavan Bhishmas. Bhavan is very respectful way of saying you. Yeah. So another couple of details here from verse 8 is that in order to encourage Drona, he mentions Kripa, Kripa, and his son Ashvatthama. Also, by way of diplomacy, he mentions Vikarna. Vikarna is an interesting person. When that gambling match happened and Draupadi was taken over to the other side and the attempt was made to undress her, from that side, the side of the Kurus, Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, Dushasana and company, the only person who protested was Vikarna. He was the only person who said, no, you must not do that, and he made a bit of a scene about it. But he's still fighting on their side. So this is not that he's a big warrior, but he's still there. He didn't go over to the Pandavas' side. Then, perhaps the last point, let's just have a look. The last point that we'll look at is that the question, what is Bhishma doing on that side? If you're familiar with Mahabharata at all, and it's mentioned to some degree in Bhagavatam, at least in purports, that the Pandavas, they were mistreated for years, and attempts were made to kill them for years by Duryodhana and his people. Bhishma was their guardian, and he was always protecting them and helping them. But what's he doing now on the other side, fighting against them? It's a good question. Well, one answer, one part at least of the answer, is that he had become financially dependent. He had become financially dependent on Duryodhana, because Duryodhana is the king. So he was obliged, he was living with them when the Pandavas were exiled. He was living with them. And one thing which is mentioned, a really subtle point, is that Duryodhana sometimes liked to cook. Duryodhana sometimes liked to cook. And Bhishma would eat the food cooked by Duryodhana. And if you eat food cooked by non-devotees, your consciousness becomes polluted. And so even though Bhishma is a Mahajan, he's not just a devotee and, someone close to the Pandavas. He's one of the Mahajans, but now he's fighting against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is like a subtle point there, just to show that be careful what you eat. Be careful whose cooking you eat. Yeah. And always take prasadam. Aha. All right. So let us conclude here. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.